Prakriti has a lot to do with the Vedic astrology. Your Prakriti, which is your innate state, the one you're born with, is determined due to the Vedic astrology alignment.
Welcome to the Phase 4 podcast, inspired by Vishen Lakiani and Ajit Nawalkar, co-founders of EverCoach, a division of Vine Valley. In this podcast, we speak to coaches and creatives about where they were, where they are, and where they are going. This is an intersection of what we focus on expands, and your story is your superpower. My guest today is Dr. Harmony Robinson Stagg. She is an Ayurveda and women's health practitioner, and she's the founder of the Ayurveda Alchemist Academy. And today we're going to talk about that and much more. Dr. Harmony Robinson Stagg, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I love it. You're doing so many things. I was just telling you, like your website, all the link tree, there's so much going on and it's all beneficial and supporting women's health. And I always just kind of begin with, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up in this space?
Yeah, so I am, as you mentioned, an Ayurveda and women's health practitioner. I've also been in allopathic Western medicine for 20 years as a registered nurse, and I'm also a doctor of Chinese medicine, so an acupuncture. So I kind of bring all of those modalities together to be able to support my women the best that I can. But my path led me down to open the Ayurveda Alchemist Academy, which is such a true calling for me. I just absolutely love educating women in the space of really getting to understand themselves and how to apply Ayurveda into their lives. I know in the modern world, because Ayurveda is like a 5,000-year-old medicine and health science. And so how do we take something that is so old but still so true today and apply it in our modern world? And so I absolutely love that when you see sort of these big aha moments and, you know, the comments of, oh my God, that just makes so much sense. And just seeing women, completely change their lives, balance their hormones and really step into their higher self.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do love that old idea too, where like the Western medicine comes in, it's maybe it works for you, but maybe it doesn't. And my own experience, it didn't work for me. I went back to these Eastern medicines, learned about things, and I started healing my own body without 22 pills or whatever. Maybe a good place to go right now is to explain what is Ayurveda.
Yeah, sure. So Ayurveda is a complete health science, and it is, like I mentioned, 5,000-year-old plus, and it originates from India. So the word Ayurveda itself is a Sanskrit word, and it means the science of life and longevity. So it's basically our playbook for life and how to live our best life according to our individual constitution. So what's really unique to Ayurveda is they look at an individual's constitution. And so if you and I came to see a practitioner with the same diagnosis, so to speak, like say we both had, digestive issues, we wouldn't be given the same protocol. We wouldn't be given the same herbs. We wouldn't be given the same lifestyle or diet because our constitutions might differ. And those constitutions are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And we all have a unique balance of the three. And so it's determining your individual balance and how they show up in your life.
That's awesome. What were those three words?
So the constitutions are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And that was a very quick overview. I mean, Ayurveda looks at, there's 8 branches. So it really looks at, our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health, our dharmic health. It's a real holistic system. But I think what people most recognize about Ayurveda is the difference in how they treat the individual constitution through these Ayurvedic doshas, the Vata, the Pitta, and the Kapha.
And so we have all of 3 of them. Sometimes they're out of balance and you're trying to bring them all back in balance.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're all born with a unique doshic imprint, which is like our fingerprint, but in Ayurvedic terms. So we will all have a unique combination of those three different doshas. And that is our prakriti. And it's formed due to the time of day we're born, the season we're born, our mother's diet, mental health state at the time. Like all of these factors go into our prakriti, the way that we're born. And then over time, we have lifestyles that might not be so conducive to our prakriti. And we, modern life, there's stress. We don't eat the best diet all of the time. And that can drive our prakriti to change, which is then what we call a vikriti, which is our imbalanced state. And that's what we work with and treat to get us back into more of a balanced state.
All right. And sorry. Sorry. Oh, I'm already on mute. I guess I'm gonna cut it right there. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So when you said the 8 branches, is that the 8 limbs of yoga? Is that the same thing or very similar?
It's not, but I love that. I love that you've brought that together because so yoga and Ayurveda are sister sciences. There's the 3 Vedic sciences. There's yoga, which is the path to enlightenment through the spiritual practice of yoga. There is Ayurveda, which is the path to enlightenment through health and the body, health science. And there is Jyotish astrology, which is Vedic astrology, which is the overseer. And so they say you can practice like any one of those 3 paths to get to moksha or liberation, to enlightenment, I guess. But when you practice the 3 together, it gives you a holistic and more faster way of sort of moving forward towards that path.
Wow, this is all so fascinating. And we're recording this just as we went into a new moon today.
Yeah.
I think I saw something on your website, Superwoman Syndrome.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Like, how did that mindset show up in your life, and how do you help other women to recognize and release it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a huge one in my area of work. And what I call superwoman syndrome is where we feel like we have to be superwoman to please everyone, to do everything, to achieve everything. And a lot of that has, those expectations have been placed upon ourselves, but also from society and whatnot. And so what that can look like in different women and what it looked like for myself, I'll go from myself. So I, as I mentioned, I think it was to you, maybe it was before we hit record, but I was a nurse in the emergency department for many, many years. And it's night shifts, it's fatiguing, it's very stressful. And then I had my twin sons who are now almost 13. But back then I hit a bit of a rock bottom because my whole identity shifted to, a nurse, to them being a mother, then trying to do both. I've always run businesses. So I was also running a business. I was yoga teaching on the side, teaching Pilates. And I always thought I grew up with this sort of mantra is I'm strong enough to do it all because of the history with my mother. She was an alcoholic and I felt like I always had to step up and do everything. So long story short, I didn't let anything give. I was doing my nursing shift. I was teaching yoga Pilates, running my activewear business, trying to care for my sons. And with all of that, I broke. My hormones were dysregulated. I got a lot of stress and anxiety that I hadn't really experienced as much before. And I called it just trying to keep up and be this superwoman. And I really had that superwoman syndrome where if I couldn't do it all, then I wasn't good enough. Why can't I do it all? I should have done it all. And that also comes to when we look at the doshas. My constitution, I'm very pitta vata. So a pitta type of woman, they are very driven and ambitious, but they can be very self-critical and perfectionists. And so their drive is they're just very goal orientated. And if they don't do that, they can feel a lot of sense of frustration with themselves or with their life. They can also drive themselves to the point of burnout. The other side of my constitution is very vata. So I've got a lot of different ideas. I want to do all the things. And I can be, and those sort of patterns can lead to some of that anxiety and stress that we see more in like a vata perspective, vata person. Whereas a woman who is more kapha, they have more inertia, they're a little bit more grounded, and they can actually suffer more with, depressive state of lack of motivation. So for the point of sharing this superwoman syndrome, I was very much in that vata pitta mindset and drive. And vata governs the central nervous system. So my central nervous system was depleted, and pitta governs our endocrine system and our hormones. And so that was very erratic as well. And so that's when I really turned to Ayurveda to truly heal and help myself. And now that I have been through it, I also see it with so many of my women, especially where I live. I'm in Australia, if you can't tell from my accent. And I live on the Gold Coast, and it is very much very active. And it is a lot, I guess, maybe California like if we're comparing it to America, maybe. So I get like a lot of those high achievers trying to fit into society, that kind of thing, and trying to do all the things. So that is the superwoman syndrome. And then the way to be able to get yourself out of that really comes down to understanding your individual constitution. Because again, the way you get out of that is going to be looking at your individual constitution, how your mind body operates and how it works. And so for a Vata type of person, it's really bringing in more grounding activities. It's having like regular meal times. It's not overloading your calendar. It's setting boundaries with people, because we like to be very social and do all the things and don't want to say no to any social engagement. But at that time, it completely depletes us as well. And then a pitta is really bringing in more fun and joy into their life and like cooling down their system, because they're so heated. They're that fire element. And so I find bringing in more joy and scheduling that in, and not being so focused on having to get every task done. So there's obviously a lot of tools, a lot of different ways we can do this, but this is sort of just in a nutshell. And then a kapha, they actually need more fire. They need more motivation. They need to like really sort of find themselves again and step into sort of more action, as opposed to like that inertia state that they can get in. So I hope that answered you.
It does. It sure does. So like, depending on what end of the spectrum, or I guess it's a triangle more, you could end up with burnout, anxiety, depression. And it sounds like maybe part of the answer is to kind of come back to the middle a bit. I think I said that already.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the principles of Ayurveda is like attracts like, and opposites balance each other out or decrease each other. So the constitutions are actually made up of the elements. So if you're going to give more like Vata type of activities to a Vata, that's only going to increase. So the way to balance it is the opposite, which is more grounding. Pitta is very hot in nature, so more cooling. And Kapha is very grounding in nature, so more energy, more heat. And so it's working out the constitution and what type of foods, what type of herbs, what type of activities are going to complement or pacify that constitution.
Right. And so are you vegan? Is that dumb to say or even ask?
No, not at all. I know I'm not vegan.
Okay. I didn't know if Ayurveda was like, right? Okay.
Yeah, I get that a lot, that question. And so Ayurveda does follow, a very sattvic diet, which means lightness, purity. And so it's very plant-based. Again, it's also, your diet is also dependent on your constitution, so your dosha, and so the foods that you eat. There are different lineages in Ayurveda, and obviously it has shifted somewhat and merged over the 5,000 years. But the lineage of the Brahmins, they were vegan. And so that is where that comes from, that strict vegan. But I mean, like one of the most treasured therapies and used in everything is ghee. And ghee is,
Right.
it's vegetarian, but it's not vegan. So
I guess I meant vegetarian. That's great. Where was I going there? Okay, so you like sound like you have so much, well, not you sound, you do have so much knowledge and wisdom around this. And even you said depending on the branch or the lineage. So did you learn from like a specific, I don't know, is guru the word or just a mentor, like a certain school of Ayurveda?
Yeah, so I actually got a scholarship to study in the States. So I did do my full advanced Ayurvedic medicine practitioner training through a school in the States, but I'd also prior to that had done Ayurvedic psychology here in Australia and Ayurvedic nutrition. So have done like quite a wide range of different Ayurvedic studies and then brought them all together.
Awesome. I want to go to acupuncture, how it fits in, but before that, when you're talking about dosha, is there a quiz you can take?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a quiz on my website. So if you go to my website and look at freebies on there, there is a dosha quiz and it will tell you your Vikriti. So remember, every time you're doing a quiz, you're looking at the state of how you are at that present time. And your Vikriti can slightly change depending like environment or what you're eating that day or doing that day. So yes, you can do a quiz, and any quiz you do will be looking more so at your Vikriti, your current imbalanced state.
Can that change between the stars, like nothing to do with yourself, just the stars in astrology, Vedic astrology?
Yeah, yeah. The planetary alignment, yeah, that can definitely cause a big shift for sure.
Oh my,
And
awesome.
since you mentioned that, like, I don't want to get too involved and confuse everyone, but your Prakriti has a lot to do with the Vedic astrology. Your Prakriti, which is your innate state, the one you're born with, is determined due to the Vedic astrology alignment of the planets and stuff at that time as well.
Brilliant. Now, where does acupuncture fit in here?
Yeah. So acupuncture, I have always been super intrigued by acupuncture. I guess also being a nurse, I love to stab people. No, but Ayurveda had this, they called it mama puncture. So there are mama points in Ayurveda, similar to acupuncture points in acupuncture, which is traditional Chinese medicine. And it's not, there's no degree in mama puncture. And again, that was sort of more of a sacred thing handed down through the lineages in Ayurveda. And these days it's more mama pressure. So it's just pressure points rather than, puncturing people. And so I decided to go and do a master's degree in acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine because I wanted to also have this tool to help support my women who have hormonal imbalances. So Ayurveda, whilst it's always the foundation of my work and I do all the light diet and lifestyle and herbs based on their Ayurvedic constitution, I'll also bring in the acupuncture for more of like that body energetic somatic healing as well.
Any like Reiki or anything like that?
I mean, I've trained in Reiki, but it's not my thing.
All right, so my intuition wasn't there. How about intuition? How does intuition come out of all this? I know you're talking about the sciences, but then there's the intuitive part as well.
Yeah, well, intuition is so important, and it's so important to be able to tap into that part of yourself because that's where that whole truth comes in, right? And if we're looking at intuition from an Ayurvedic psychology perspective, we've got to look, I guess, at the 7 different layers of the mind. So the 7 layers of consciousness. And so in Ayurveda, we have manas, which is the sensory mind. And so that is like the mind as we know it. And then we have the ahamkara, the ego mind. We have the buddhi, which is our higher intellect, discerning mind. Chitta, which is the subconscious. And then within the subconscious, we store some samskaras, which are like those limiting core beliefs. We have smriti, which is the wisdom keeper. And then this is where intuition comes in. We have vijnana, which is that higher knowledge, that intuition. And then we have Atman, which is pure consciousness and soul. And so when you're living more in your higher self and your higher state of being, you're accessing those higher levels of the mind, like your intuition and and your buddhi mind, your higher intellect. And so people who practice accessing these parts of their mind, live more of this sort of sattvic life, this pure life, and have better control over their mind and their mindset. And we know our mind can always play rude tricks on us. And often that's when we're operating from our manas, from our ahamkara, and those sort of lower centers of the mind. So intuition for me is a really important part of the mind to train. And I think it can be very much trained, and it takes a lot of time and effort to, well, not effort, but I guess a lot of time, and you've got to put energy into listening to your intuition and knowing that it's the truth, as opposed to making your decisions from that ahamkara, that ego based. So for in the scheme of Ayurveda, if we're talking about it in that way, it is a very important aspect of our health, is, looking after our mind.
All right, you opened a nice door. How do you know if it's your intuition or just your mind or some scars trying to come out again? How do you know
Yeah,
the difference?
such a good question. And a lot of the time, I'm trying to answer these simply, but you're like going deeper into it. So we talk about in Ayurveda the three mahagunas of the mind. There's sattva, which I've spoken about, that lightness, purity. There's tamas, which is that inertia, sort of darker mind state. And there's rajas, which is where we mostly operate from, which is that motivation, that transformation, all of those type of aspects of the mind. And so if someone is naturally more in their tamasic state of mind, so that's they operate from more of that darker side of their mind, then their initial thought pattern is generally going to be called from their ahamkara, their ego. Whereas or even in their rajasic mind, in their tamasic mind, if they act from that tamasic sort of state, they also might be calling more from their samskaras, like you mentioned. If they are operating more from a sattvic state of mind, then the Vijnana mind, the Buddhi mind, so those intellects and intuitions are going to step in first, generally, not all the time. And the way that we know and understand and can listen to those is, how do we actually feel when that thought comes up? Like, is it expansive? Because our intuition is expansive. It's truth. It's sattvic. Or is it confined, like constraining? Is there some fear or nervousness around it? And that's generally from our lower states of mind, more to keep us safe, like our ahamkara, our ego mind, which isn't a bad thing. As human beings, we need it. But when we're trying to discern whether it's intuition or ahamkara, we need to know how it feels in the body as well, because our mind and body are intricately connected. We can't separate the two.
That's brilliant. So I can tell you from my experience of just doing the work year over year, day after day, over and over, I used to think a lot. Like, I never thought of it till you said it, where automatically, if you've just had this negative, cynical, pessimistic look your whole life, that's where your first thoughts will go. But when you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, I used to think like that. And now I can see the difference. So that's a really amazing answer. And also a part of it, if I'm hearing right too, is you'll feel it like more, you'll get more of a feminine thing towards intuition as opposed to just getting stuck in your mind again with the masculine. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so now you're doing a bunch. So I want to kind of move into for like mothers, homemakers. Before we do that though, if this episode resonates with you, please like, subscribe, share, and reach out to Dr. Harmony Robinson Stagg. Obviously, you can tell she knows what she's talking about. I go deep because that's just what we do here. And I'm glad you could, because it's good. People like it. We get to see your personality and your knowledge and wisdom. And I think it's important to kind of draw that out and highlight it. So I guess now I kind of want to move towards those moms. So like a busy mom, entrepreneur, caretaker, they're feeling stretched thin, like you said before, when you face burnout. So like, what's one Ayurvedic area, or we didn't even go to the soulful part yet. Oh, but we could do that. But how can they start reclaiming some of that balance?
Yeah, sure. I guess it is hard to always be in balance, and we just have to accept that, right? Because we put, especially a pitta, they're going to put so much pressure on themselves to maybe be in balance if that's what they're trying to achieve, right? And we have to accept that life ebbs and flows. But when we understand our constitution, for instance, we can start to understand how we can live our life to support that constitution. So if we are someone who is a mother, if we're working, if we're doing all the things, if we're trying to show up everywhere because, that's what we've got to do, um, it does lead to overwhelm, exhaustion. It leads to sort of like that burnout, right? And so when we can figure out what type of constitution we are, so a Vata mind, they're like the creative thinkers, but they can become also the anxious thinker. So they can be very gifted with intuition, and imagination, but they also struggle with overthinking, inconsistency, and worry. And their imbalances will lead to scattered thoughts, fear of judgment, and decision fatigue. So if we know we're more of a Vata type of person and the amount of things we're doing is overwhelming us, then we have to stop and we have to look at our schedule. And often they won't have a Google Calendar schedule because they'll just have things scattered and written everywhere and keep it in their mind. And that, again, is too much of that ether Vata energy. And so take things away. Don't add more things. Unschedule some of the least important things in your life. Try to write down what you need to do. Make sure you have a routine because, again, Vata governs the central nervous system. So if you're finding yourself very scattered, very wired all over the place, we need to bring ourselves back into alignment. And that means more grounding. And that comes through routine. Even though Vata doesn't naturally like routine, it's what will keep them in check. And so waking up at the same time, going to bed at the same time, eating your meals at the same time, that all represents safety to the body and to the mind. And so it's going to take some of that scattered energy and streamline it. For more of a pitta, they like their routine. The other thing, so for Vata, like I said, routine, breath work's really good, grounding, food, and journaling. So journaling their thoughts. But for a pitta, they are very driven, but like I said, they can be very self-critical. And so they're also more of those intense, ambitious people. They have very clear visions, but they also tend towards harsh judgment of themselves and others. They can become more irritable and anger easily, and they can become very controlling. And so they know they're out of balance when there's so many different things going on and they're like just trying to control every little piece because that gives them a sense of safety. But they actually have to try to release that, that never enough syndrome, their need for control. And what I always find with the Pitta women is, yeah, sure, have your schedule, have your routine, but take out some of the less important things and let someone else do that for you. They have a real problem with getting help, and replace some of that time with something that you enjoy, a little bit of fun. I live on the ocean, like at the beach, and so a lot of my pittas, they're like to go out and have a surf. And so doing that is like going to be the best thing for them. Go out in nature, enjoy a hike. Like they really need to get out in the elements, away from all of the work energy and the hustle and the grind, and just find a way, even if you can schedule half an hour in a week for yourself, like you really need to do it. You need to make that a priority. And doing some cooling breath work, some like practices that are sort of going to cool the body. And then a Kapha mindset, they're loyal, but resistant to change. And so they may be the ones that, yes, they might be the very nurturing mothers. And so their days are filled with, they have, 5 kids and they're doing all the lunch boxes and then they're baking at home for their husband, trying to make that all perfect and cleaning the house. And their day could look very different and they're still doing their job 3 days a week or whatever they're doing. And again, this is very generalizing and stereotyping. So I don't mean to do that, but just trying to paint a picture. But they're often grounded, nurturing. emotionally very wise, but they can become very stagnant and over-attached to comfort or self-doubting. And their imbalances will show up as procrastination, emotional holding, and fatigue. And so will often think, oh, they're burnt out because they're really fatigued. But actually, that's more of a pitta trait. Maybe they're burnt out because of the fatigue of that emotional attachment that they're having and not doing enough for themselves, not putting in boundaries, not actually going out and moving their body and going for a walk and getting the energy from the nature that they need. So their strategy would be more movement, more stimulation, and small, consistent actions over time, and eating a lighter foods as well to lighten the load.
It sounds like all three of them need to add an element of surrender if overwhelm is coming into the picture.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's a book, oh man, I forget what it's called, but the study was like hotel maids who were feeling like they're not getting exercise and they're just feeling like I don't have time, right? And then they put the watches on them and watched the data. And then all of a sudden, so nothing changed, right? They were just wearing the watch and realized that what the data was saying. And they're like, oh, I'm getting all the exercise. Their heart rate started going down. They started feeling better physically. And it's just like, wow. I guess when you're saying about the pita is that if they're at home doing that kind of thing, they're not realizing it. And then one thing I don't want to skip over, you said it's such a great, we always hear, I don't have time. I don't have time. Half an hour a week, she said. Like, if you don't have a half an hour a week to love yourself, then we got a bigger problem than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, really, it should be half an hour a day. But like, if we've got to start somewhere, I'll take the half hour a week. But yes, I don't have a time. I get it. Like a lot of people say that. But at the same time, I've also lived through not having a lot of time, and I still have been able to manage. So I was, like I said, studying a master's degree, which was in another state. So it's a 3-hour airplane flight away. I have twin boys who are really high up in their soccer. And so it's 7 days a week at a soccer field. I run a business. I work as well as a working mum. And my husband's a shift worker, so he's not around to help me out a lot. We don't have family nearby. There's a lot going on. And so I get the no time thing, but I still create what we call a dinacharya, which is a daily routine to be able to nourish myself, my body, my mind, so that I can live more in alignment with myself and step into my higher self, because that to me is going to support my kids better, when I can show up as my higher self, I'm going to be a better friend. I'm going to be a better wife. I'm going to be a better mentor and a better Ayurvedic practitioner. And so I think if you can't do that for yourself, you're actually, letting down the people around you more so than when you think that, letting people walk over you and not having boundaries, you think that that's helping them. It's absolutely not.
100%. Even like 10 minutes in the morning, like for meditating, you actually end up getting more time back in your day by doing that for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even before I jumped on this podcast, because it's like early in the morning here in Australia, but I had to get the kids to school and I only had a few moments. So I chose to still do my ritual. I light an incense, and then I have these 3 different essential oils. And depending on what constitution I feel, like if I'm feeling more vata, pitta, or kapha, I choose that oil and I just take 3 deep breaths, and the scent of that oil is sort of help activating that dosha or pacifying that dosha. And so that's all I got to do is the three deep breaths. But that centered me and it got me completely ready to sit here and talk to you guys.
That's amazing. So I ask everyone this question. This is the Phase 4 podcast, and Phase 4 in the 6-phase meditation by Vishen Lakhiani is about creating your future 3 years out. So where's Dr. Harmony Robinson Stagg 3 years from today?
3 years. Well, my Pitta nature's already scheduled and planned for that. No. I've grown the Ayurveda Alchemist Academy. So I'm planning to release a level 2 next year, which is even a higher qualification. And that is growing absolutely epically. We're also running some trainings overseas in India, Sri Lanka, Costa Rica. and and just also being a really present mum, supporting the boys to their path to pro soccer, which is what they want to do. So yeah, integrating all of that. But really, I'm seeing my academy grow a lot. I'm also about to release my first book, Ayurveda and the Alchemy of Her, in July. And so I think within 3 years' time, I will have a second book out as well.
That's awesome. So can we talk about those certifications? There's certifications, right, that you're delivering?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we
Absolutely.
talk about those? There, I saw two. Is there one alchemist and then soul breathwork? Are those separate,
Oh,
the
yeah.
same?
Yeah, so they're different certifications. They all come under the academy. So the Ayurveda Alchemist coaching certifications and accredited certification for women to become Ayurvedic holistic health coaches. And the ISL breathwork is a Vedic breathwork practitioner training. At the moment, it does involve 2 day in person on the Gold Coast, and we do run some in New Zealand. So at the moment, it is including an in person component. What that might look like in the future may change. And we also run Ayurvedic therapist program as well, certification to learn the Ayurvedic massages and treatments, body therapy treatments. And then, as I mentioned, we are working on a level 2 practitioners level of the Ayurveda practitioner certification as well.
So we're trying to embody her high herself
Yeah, hi herself. That's all right.
and live an inspired life.
Yeah, and we've just actually opened a pathway in the Ayurveda alchemist. So there are some women who want to really study Ayurveda to embody it for themselves, but not necessarily make a business of it or get certified, like go through all the certification. And so we have opened up an embodiment pathway where they can study Ayurveda and really implement it in their own life to transform themselves without having to go down that certification pathway as well.
Amazing. So before I ask my final question, I always let the guests take it wherever they want. So if you have something, message of hope, something to sell, or put it all together, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, wow, thank you. When it's left to myself, I'm like, well, that's a big question. I don't know where to go with that. No.
Ask the
I just
calendar.
Where's my calendar? Quick. No, I just really love sharing all of this information. And my whole dream is just to really inspire women to be able to step into their higher selves. And so I do want to thank you for the opportunity to come and share this work on your podcast. And like I said, my first book will be coming out in July, Ayurveda and the Alchemy of Her. So if you want to hear more about Ayurveda, about women's hormones, about the 3 pillars of Ayurveda, the higher self methodology is health alchemy. So looking at our physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health. And then the empowered mind paradigm. So we go into the Ayurvedic psychology, which we touched on in this episode. And then dharmic impact, like really living in alignment with purpose. So that's what the book's based on. So go and grab yourself a copy of Ayurveda and the Alchemy of Her would be my thing. And come and hang out on my podcast, Harmony Inspired Health, as well, if you want to listen to me rant on even more.
That's awesome. I was just looking. I'm like, I forgot the podcast. All right. Is there anything I forget? Because you're doing so much that I'm sure I missed something. But anything else before I ask my final question?
I think the book, the podcast, I'm usually hanging out on Instagram, Harmony Inspired Ayurveda, and the website's harmonyinspiredhealth.com.au. AU because we're in Australia.
All right. My final question is always, how can people reach you? But you just answered that. So are you going to bring the boys over to North America next summer for the World Cup?
Oh my gosh, that would be a dream. Yes. Love that so much. Like, so much.
Dr. Harmony, thank you so much. This was fun. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well.